All right. Are we ready to get started?
Ready.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome to the 28th edition of Connext Live, everybody. I'm Audrey Birnbaum. Mark is out on the West Coast traveling the mountains with his daughter. So we have special guest host Dennis Wakbayashi today, who is going to interview our special guest, Dave Fish. Please enjoy the show. Dennis and Dave, take it from here.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I am pleased to welcome today Dave Fish, the author of the Customer Experience Field Guide. As you know, there has been a lot of recent conversation about practitioners, doers, makers, thinkers in the area of CX. So I was very excited to have the opportunity to talk to Dave. And with that said, Dave, in addition to your PhD in social psychology, which I think gives you an edge over most CXers right out of the gate, what else should the audience know about you and what you're working on these days?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, and great to be here amongst all the other CX folks today. So yeah, no, I'm a adjunct professor down at University of Arkansas. It keeps me fresh. They tell me that cargo shorts are no longer fashionable, so it keeps me on the cutting edge of fashion as well. So and then you know, most of what my work here at Curiosity is involved with is using insights to kind of develop prototypes for testing. So we really try to pride ourselves on not just collecting customer feedback on existing systems, but trying to brainstorm and figure out what's in the future as well, and what's not. So yeah, great to be here.
Well, thank you for being our guest today. And by way of your backstory, I just would love for you to share with us how I think you were going to be in insurance sales, if I'm not mistaken, and somehow you went from insurance sales all the way up to Curiosity as a mission in life, but you went by way of Toyota and Walmart and some other brands. Tell us your backstory.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I turned up. All my friends thought I was nuts. My dad was an insurance agent in a small little town in Berwick, Pennsylvania. If anyone knows where that's at, probably not. And his father was an insurance agent, so all my friends thought I was crazy for you know, picking up my stuff and moving to California and going to grad school there. And yeah, so kind of started off in employee engagement in an OD role at a bank. And so really started understanding the employee side of the equation as it relates to what I didn't know would be my future, which is customer experience. So obviously in banking, the teller and most of what you experience in banking, as probably most of the audience knows, is humans, or what you'd like to anyway. Some technology as well. And so that really got me interested in the employee side. And then I kind of flipped over, had an opportunity to work at Toyota Motor North America, which is now North America, which was then in Torrance, it's now down in Plano, and got the kind of the product role from that. So I worked on Sequoia launch and Tundra launch and a lot of different things. And then was kind of thrown over into what was called the customer central. And so it was really around putting all customer information together and also involved in what was customer sat. And so customer sat is like, oh, it looks like market research, right? Same thing. No, very, very different. So that was a big eye-opening experience because you had these customer sat systems, which were in many ways kind of compensation systems. In the worst case scenario, in the best case, they were used to kind of create new processes and so forth. So I did that for a while. I figured I didn't have a career in selling cars, moved over to J.D. Power Associates. Eventually ended up as running the automotive division for Merits, was CMO and product development, in charge of product development for Merits, which then got merged with InMoment. So I kind of got to see the sort of the measurement part of the world, and then continued on my sort of career where I really wanted to kind of get into impacting the customer experience. So I joined an agency here in Bentonville. One of their clients is a small company called Walmart. And so we did a lot around customer experience work, But what I found pretty quickly, and Dennis and I were talking about this, is there's only so much you can do with marketing. So if the strawberries are rotten, you can't convince people they're not rotten with good signs and good communication. So from there, I did a few other small things, but eventually set up Curiosity with the idea being, let's take all these different disciplines of impacting customer experience and try to put them together. So employee marketing, uh, operations, all the different parts that kind of go into influencing the customer experience, and try to put them together to improve, actually make an impact on the customer experience. So that's my story in a nutshell. Maybe
That,
a nutshell.
that's a great nutshell. Some of the things that came to mind while I listened to your journey, no pun intended, unfold is at some point, each of us as a CX professional, we're faced with some real decision making of our own because it's so difficult. People often underestimate the complexity related to creating significant change at an organization. I always like to say people love innovation, but they hate change. And as change agents ourselves, I think that there are different kinds of change agents at organizations, Dave. And I'd be curious to know what kind of change agents you see out as you are part of providing CX, but I also think I'd like to hear about you as a change agent, because I think you've chosen to go on your own path to drive change rather than try to do it from the inside out. So first, tell us about the change agents and how you perceive them from your PhD in social psychology.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of different approaches to change agents within organizations. And over the years, I've kind of seen sort of some archetypes that are out there. Actually, I read about them in my book as well. One of them is the guru, right? So we all know this gal or guy, and they know, like, they're basically advocates for customer experience. Great ideas, great speakers, really motivational, but sometimes have a hard time getting things done. So they could rally the troops, but when it comes to a plan, maybe not so much. And so the other ones that I thought, talk about is sort of the rebel, right? And so the rebel is pretty effective. And I've seen this in a couple of organizations, and where they're just like someone who got pulled over from some other department or outside the organization, and they're there to make things happen, basically. And so, like all these personas, pros and cons, right? So the rebel's an outsider, so sometimes they don't always make friends, right? So then you have like a diplomat. Like the diplomat is someone who can kind of make deals in the back room and so forth. So really, there's probably like 6 or 7 of these different personas, but I think really having this team of people working together, everyone talks about the chief customer officer, really important, but there's also her team too that's really important. And have, like any great team, a balance of skills and approaches to be really effective. So you need some bulldozers on a team, but you also need some diplomats on your team, right? And the bureaus have a place too. So they all kind of work together to affect change. So having that team is really important.
I think that's interesting how you describe the different archetypes, because it really shows how each has a unique swim lane. And I think from your empathetic awareness of all these different archetypes, it puts you in a position to help weave them together, of course. But back to you, your archetype, because there's a specific archetype amongst the CX community that decides, I've tried from the inside out for long enough, and now I have to go from the outside in. Take us through that process? How did you make the commitment to lean in on doing it from the outside in?
Yeah, if I have to disclose sort of my archetype, I probably am more of the rebel, right? So I work well in organizations, but I quickly get frustrated. So I'm better at being a coach for organizational change than actually being the diplomat and getting everyone on the same page and rolling in the same direction. So I like the idea of being able to help and assist, provide some guidance of how to drive change internally. Obviously, there's skill sets out there being embedded within the organization where it's really hard to drive change as an outsider. you could be an advocate for a point of view and so forth, but the change really has to drive from within. And that's hard. It's really hard work. I think it's the most challenging part of CX. I mean, in terms of like getting an organization to change, it's really easy to go step on a scale and just see your weight every day. It's a lot harder to go out and take a run and lose some weight. And that's what a lot of organizations struggle with as well, because it's hard.
Yeah, and so that brings us to, CX, and the title of this event was how to build a CX program from the ground up. Let's set the stage. In 1994, customer experience as a business methodology was completely mature. All the necessary tools and frameworks that have existed for almost 20 years. We took 10 years to just get the first books by thought leaders out there. And then now we're almost 10 years past that, and you have a book out, the Field Guide. One, why do you think it's taken so long for a mature model to enter the market? And two, tell us about how your book is relevant today and how you set the stage for transformation.
Yeah, so it's interesting with CX. I guess I don't really view it as mature as it exists today. So when you talk about CX, I don't know what your experience is, Dennis, but I talk to people about what I thought was CX, and they're talking about something completely different. Like you have a marketing background, right? So that's probably a different lens than what maybe my background is and so forth. So some people, when they talk about customer experience, it's about events. Others, it's about call centers, right? So from my standpoint, this whole evolution of customer experiences has been kind of developing in these different petri dishes, and now they're kind of coming together. And I think with CXPA and other organizations trying to pull these things together under one discipline, that's a really good thing. But there's still a lot to go. As far as sort of, the reason I wrote the book was I was finding myself, there's a need for it. Like I was finding myself in consultation scenarios where I started to repeat myself, and, being kind of lazy, I decided to write it down so I didn't have to like re-explain it over and over again. It's sort of how I get motivated to write stuff. And so, yeah, what the guide does is, if I've noticed in a lot of these CX leadership positions, they'll have a guy or a gal who's in logistics or advertising someplace else, and they're like a high performer who said, "Hey, Bob, you're now in charge of customer experience. Make it happen. You got 3 years or 5 years," and they're just like, "I don't know what to do," So smart folks, but they don't have any background. So I wrote the book to kind of get started, to send them down a path. It's not necessarily a color by numbers kind of thing, but if you want to use it as a color by numbers, you can. But it's more of like, here's, when you see these programs get set up, here's the things to do that tend to make them more successful, or things to avoid. Right? So anyway, that was sort of the impetus for writing the book.
Well, thank you for that. And as we were in the waiting room before this event started, I noticed a couple of people in the crowd, and I recognize that this audience has all of those different kind of CXers that you described. I would say we have the representation from the customer care side, the marketing and brand side, a little bit of operations and logistics from folks like Scott Gibley, or we have even, I think, the cheerleaders, the catalysts for the conversation. So I think what would be interesting for all of us to hear is, because you have this diverse perspective and the book, tell us the top 3 things out of the book that we need to know to kickstart CX in an organization.
Sure, yeah. So I think my top 3, first thing is, sounds simple, but like, let's all agree on what we're trying to do, right? Having a charter, having some kind of governance, having a plan, even if you're going to change it in 3 to 6 months or whatever, just writing it down and getting alignment with the organization as a whole. And also making sure, and this sounds so trite and so common, but it has to have the top level support. It can't be window dressing. In my opinion, there's no such thing as grassroots CX, right? It has to be a priority for the organization. And so that's the first thing. The second thing I think is around really understanding, things from the customer's perspective. And so there's a lot of great techniques out there. Journey mapping is obviously a really good approach, but also sometimes it's just going out and talking with people. I think so often when we get caught up, especially in the COVID days, of kind of being okay in our houses or behind our desks and not going out and talking with customers. And it's amazing if you sit down with people and just really understand what's up with them. And it doesn't matter if you sell underwear or cars or bank accounts, whatever that is. Understanding your customers and what their situations are can go a really long way. And then I think the last thing is, and this is something I beat on all the time, is really getting focused on doing things. And so often a lot of the customer experience programs I've seen really focus on measurement. It's like, okay, we're measuring things, and that's we feel good about that because numbers are coming in, there's dashboards and things like that. That's obviously not enough. It's going out and experimenting, creating things, and then getting the feedback on those things. And it doesn't have to be perfect products. They could be paper prototypes or storyboards or animatics or anything or just talking to people. But people have a hard time telling you what they want until you show them. And so that's sort of my operating model for the last 5 to 10 years.
That's really an interesting perspective. I think a lot of us on this in this meeting share that perspective. One of the things two of the things that you touched on, I've come to a realization recently, and I think your conversation here reaffirms that, which is, I think I have come to a place where I have to also be a customer of any brand that I consult with or I speak to or advise on customer experience. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Planet Fitness, it's where our family is customers, and I go to work out in the mornings by myself, but I go in the afternoons with my wife and daughter. And we always go to Planet Fitness, that gym, rather than a different gym for my wife and daughter to work out. And I started to realize that the equipment in the gym was set up specifically to be female friendly and male friendly. So for instance, you have the Stairmasters way in the back, so no one's looking at the Stairmasters, or certain machines are actually pointed facing the wall. And it occurred to me, unless you were really a customer, there's no dashboard that's going to tell you that information.
Yeah, it's I love that stuff, and I'm always amazed at how engaged people are in this stuff. I just take for granted, like holiday light sets. Like, who cares? People have really passion about holiday light sets or men's basic underwear. Like, who knew? To me, it's just kind of like undershirts and stuff. But people.
Yeah, exactly. I think we have an extra mic on. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Being in the shoes of the customers. So we have just a few more minutes, and what I always try to do is provide value to an audience where they wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. When we talk about how to build a CX program from the ground up, I think we all would say the empathy and the alignment, the collaboration, finding the stakeholders to create the momentum. How do you tactically do some of the things that you do that maybe none of the rest of us do in those early stages?
Well, I can't speak to what others may or may not be doing, but my guess is, sometimes we get kind of caught up in process, and I'm all about process. But ISO is a great example of a lot of paperwork, right? And sometimes people lose the sort of the spirit of ISO versus what it's the actual going through the paperwork. And so I think the same thing can be true in CX. We can get caught up in journey mapping and we're doing the process 1, 2, 3 and da 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 da, and it kind of devolves into this like busy work potentially, and some folks may miss the actual intent is to go out and understand, right? And the process is there to help you understand. It's not to complete the process by itself. So it's just one example. I think it's that willingness to be kind of, I'll use the word agile, right? They're willing to kind of learn as you go, to not be beholden to process, but to use it to get to the results that you really need. And some people, when you get off, if you have a process you're going through and you kind of make a right turn because the circumstances change, that really can upset some people. I found that that's always really kind of interesting. Is like halfway through the process, if it's not working, let's change it up and see what else will work. And sometimes you really discover great things doing that.
Totally agree with that. To your point, a lot of the busy work comes from being caught up in a fixed objective rather than the curiosity and the exploration. I often try to explain to people that my job here is not to give you answers. My job here is to help you fail better. and so I think that's right. Tell us about, in our last few minutes, I'd like to hear about, well, before we get too far down the road, your book. Where do people get this field guide so that they can take some of your tips and tricks and be better themselves?
Yeah, here's the book plug. Yeah, so here's the book. It's available on Amazon.com. It's available on BookLogix. It's available on Apple Books, and I can send some links out in the chat. But it's a short read. About 250 pages. There's some good references in there. So I am an academic, but I promise you, anyone who knows me, hopefully don't come off as an academic and the bad side of the academic stuff in terms of sometimes, journal articles a little boring. Mine is very filled with a lot of examples and a lot of very personal examples from my own life as well, which I think a lot of people can identify with. So I hope that, and Audrey has just published the link down there if you're interested. So thank you for that. So yeah, that's how you get it.
For the record, I will say your curious rebel persona is coming through to this audience perfectly. You're not giving off the total academic vibe. And finally, I think, tell us a little bit about your business, Curiosity CX. You're sort of a boutique, specialized problem solver. And the reason I like that is because what you do is you're able to meet people at the beginning, mid, or ongoing stages of CX because you've seen the spectrum. But tell us about your business. What are you focusing on in terms of the trends? What are you seeing out there in the market as a CEO that we as CXers can also pay attention to?
Well, I'm a very fortunate guy in that I get to do what I love every day. And when I was in previous roles, I've had a lot of great jobs, really, really great jobs. But I found that being in the big research firms and CX firms, I felt like distant, especially when you get to more senior levels. You're not doing the work anymore, and you're not understanding the business problems always. It's just something on a spreadsheet. And so I really like being back talking with individual clients. And really, I think what we do that's a little different than maybe some of the firms is we really are more of an old school agency where we're actually lockstep with our clients and understand their business, not maybe as well as they do, obviously, but we understand, we have that sort of empathy for what they're trying to do, both from a strategic level, but also from a political standpoint, which is how how things happen in organizations, what are the roadblocks and so forth. And so having that really close partnership with not hundreds of customers, but a handful of customers is really rewarding to me because you can actually see the impact of your work on an ongoing basis rather than just throw the report over the wall and I wonder what happened to that, kind of thing.
It's so true. I find most the politics, the larger the organization, the more of a diplomat. You definitely need a diplomat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here. So the market, is there an industry, a category, or a specialty in CX our audience should just put on their top 5 things that they pay attention to today in the market post-pandemic?
I will tell you that, well, there's a couple of slots. One is data, data scientists, but really this idea of being able to merge information, make sense of it, and then if you're really sort of a purple squirrel, tell a great story, right? So that I think the big skill set in change agents, we talked about these personas, but the ability to kind of be a boundary spanner, be able to be in multiple worlds all at the same time. So you can kind of understand and empathize with these different groups of people. So when I worked at Toyota for many years, they would rotate people through different departments. And I thought that was a horrible idea. You never become good at anything. But the idea behind it was a good one, in that a little bit of everything. And so you're able to kind of connect everything together and solve problems, bring people together to solve problems. So I think if you have that capability, the analytics, and then really everyone talks about storytelling, but it's so true. If you're good at making really complicated things simple, it's easy to make simple things complicated, but making complicated things simple and explaining that to super busy execs and making them care, making them passionate about it, man, if you could do that, then you could write your own ticket, basically.
100%. Make it easy for the politician to take it to the people.
Basically, I need some bullet points, some sound bites, right?
So Dave, this is where I catch guests off guard. I want to dive into we're going to shift gears for a second. I'm going to ask you a more personal question that I hope galvanizes in people's mind who Dave Fish is and makes you memorable. Here's the question. You read a lot of books. You've written a book. What was the last book that you gave to someone as a gift and why?
Well, if I'm honest, it was my book. But the other one was
separate author. Other author book you gave to someone and why?
I believe it was The Power of Moments by the Heath brothers. And I thought they are just incredible writers. And on the topic of creating experiences, I thought they did a really great job. I'm a big fan of the Heath brothers. So I think it's called The Power of Moments. But I gave that to someone and highly recommended it. So
who did you give it to? Are you free to disclose?
No, I think I gave it to my coworker, Michelle. I think that's who I gave it to.
Okay. So now what we know about you is that it's great to be your coworker because you get random gifts. Personalized to us. Dave, it's been an amazing opportunity for me to speak to you both yesterday and today. I appreciate you being on the show today. Is there any last parting words you'd like to share? Where do you want people to connect with you? Besides buying your book, where do they connect with you?
You could please send a LinkedIn connection. I'm out there, or my email is real simple, dave@curiositycx.com. So I'm always, I love connecting with people, and it's been a real privilege to be here talking with, having the privilege of talking with all of you folks here today. And Dennis and Audrey, thanks so much for hosting today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. With that, to the audience of CX Forums, I say thank you for coming to show up when I'm the guest host. Dave Fish, thank you, sir. I hope people check your book out and remember to connect with you after the show. And with that, I'm going to run, but I'm passing it back to you, Audrey. Audrey, thank you for producing such a great show today.
Dennis, thank you so much. Dave, that was incredible. We really enjoyed you guys. And actually, Dave, I don't know if you have a couple extra minutes. We have some great questions. I'm going to stop the recorded portion of this show. If you can stay for a couple more minutes, that would be great. Dennis, thank you guys again so much. If you are watching the recorded portion, you're going to miss out on the networking breakout. So please join us every Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern on Connext Live. And thank you guys again for just a wonderful show.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna stop this recording here. Yes.